It's that spooky time of year, folks. And with Resident Evil 9 coming in a couple months, I think it's about time we set our hopes unreasonably high and talk about another potential RE remake. Resident Evil Code Veronica, baby, let's go! We'll be going through the entire game and identify which aspects Capcom can improve or remove altogether. Before I continue, I want to clarify that these are just my opinions and nothing in this video should be taken seriously. I feel like I need to say that every time with these. But without wasting any more time, let's get started.
Resident Evil.
Oh, and I should also mention, there are spoilers. Let's get things right on track by talking about the game's introduction. We begin with our main character, Claire Redfield, being captured and sent to a prison called Rockford Island after going to Paris and snooping around an Umbrella facility looking for her brother, Chris. Unfortunately, Chris wasn't in Paris. Anyway, and that's how we got here. This scene is a really cool introduction to the game, but there's just one thing that kind of bugs me about it. You know how the old Resident Evil games are known for being a little bit anime at times? You know, where a certain character suddenly becomes a superhero and can somehow outrun a helicopter turret and also win a 1v100 against a bunch of soldiers with just 3 shots. This game's cutscenes feel a little too anime for my taste, if you know what I mean. I understand that at the time, these cutscenes were great, and even today, I still think there's like a certain charm to them, but I would imagine that the Code Veronica remake would crank down the intensity of the scene and make it more about Claire being a sneaky little devil, gathering up information and getting caught in the process. I feel like that would be a bit more sensible while also keeping the same sequence of events intact. Rockford Island is where the majority of this game takes place. This island has plenty of locations to explore, like the prison, a training facility, and even a haunted mansion. But I feel like they could do away more with the prison especially. Here we meet a character named Rodrigo Juan Raval, the guy who captured us and brought us here. He then allows us to leave, and that's it for the prison itself. I've been a big fan of the scary prison atmosphere, so I think they could do something with this. Maybe by adding extra jail cells or office rooms. Also, I think it would be cool if they made the prison more like a tutorial area where you learn the controls, find your weapons, and encounter your first zombie. And once you learn all the basics, they could add an intense chase scene with the graveyard zombies. I think that'd be cool as hell. I brought him up earlier, but now let's talk about Rodrigo. I hope that they give him more of an important role in the story. On the surface, you might think he's just a pointless side character, but there's more to him than meets the eye. He actually has some cool lore. Apparently, he was a native of Rockford Island and was forced to join the Umbrella Corporation's security forces after his village was destroyed. I would want the remake to give him the same treatment that they did with Marvin from RE2. If they could go deeper into his backstory and implement that into his character, that'd be awesome. We then meet another character, this kid, named Steve. This kid is pretty much this game's Leon, but lame. He'll be pretty much our sidekick for a good portion of this game, but just like all cool sidekicks, they have to have a tragic ending. But we're not at that point yet. For this one, I would want the remake to develop more Steve's character, diving deeper into his backstory about his parents, and I would also want them to rework his adolescent personality to be more mature and not as much of,
Shut up! I don't want to talk about it!
Quit your temper tantrum, Steve! While we're on this topic, I do have one last thing, but I'd make a call to just ditch the lovey-dovey romance subplot. It just feels a bit out of left field, and in my opinion, not executed very well. Honestly, I'd prefer to go a different route with this, but if they do decide to keep the romance subplot, at the very least make it a bit more subtle. After leaving the prison grounds, we now enter the palace, which is a pretty neat area, but that's not where we're talking about. This is where our totally intimidating villain makes his acquaintance. And here is where we learn about the Ashford family, and more specifically, the twins. I hope the remake can delve deeper into the Ashford twins' origins, as well as the Ashford family tree altogether. They could go more in depth into the Ashford family's relations with Umbrella, as well as how the twins were created in the first place and how they were raised. Alfred Ashford is basically the secondary antagonist of the game, and
I so want to enjoy this.
okay, I'm not gonna lie, this guy kinda sucks. Alfred really fits into his role of being the inferior twin when compared to his sister, Alexia, which this mixed with his goofy personality makes him very unlikable. It's a shame since he does have potential, especially if they did more with his dual persona. In the story, the superior twin Alexia tells Alfred that in order to have full control over the T Veronica virus inside her, she would need to be cryofrozen for 15 years, which left Alfred developing a second personality, imitating his sister. I feel like this concept would be much more interesting if they made it more like mysterious and less...
What? No!
To go off on a side tangent, another aspect that the remake needs to improve is the functionality of the dual pistols or machine guns. In this game, when using a dual-wielding weapon, it can aim at 2 enemies at once, which is useful in theory, but in practice, especially when you're fighting multiple or even bigger enemies, it's a pretty easy way to get yourself cornered and exterminated. If they can improve or even change the mechanics of the dual-wielding in the remake, that would be lovely. While we make our way to the training facility, we stumble upon a wild graboid from the Tremors movies. I might be a little sarcastic with that last statement, but not gonna lie, I would redesign this Gulpworm to look more like the claw mouth graboid with the xenomorph's inner mouth inside. I don't expect it to look like this, but I do think it'd be cool to see what they can do with this worm. Also, I would like the Gulpworm to be an optional boss fight, or have it to where if you kill it as Claire, you won't have to fight it later on as Chris, which would offer different outcomes and possibly different cutscenes. You can even have the Gulpworm's territory connect all the other parts of the island. Like if you want to go from the palace to the prison, you would have to run through the Gulpworm's territory. I think that'd be awesome. Up next is the Bandersnatch, which are these elastic rubbery alternatives to the Tyrants. While I don't necessarily hate them, in fact they might be my favorite design-wise, I feel like you could make these guys much scarier. I would imagine that they would have more of a slimy, gooey design on them, while still maintaining some characteristics of a Tyrant. They're also like a depressed version of a Tyrant, so I would show that expression in their face more. As for their mechanics, I love how they can attack you from a distance and even pull you across the room. Now if the remake can go a little further on this idea and make the Bandersnatches be able to swing themselves around like Spider-Man, that'd be cool. So after eliminating our rubber friend and witnessing an ultimate simp moment, we then get control of Steve, going on an absolute massacre, destroying everything in his path. For only 2 minutes. Yep, that's all the time you're getting. By the way, this is the only time in the entire game that we get to play as Steve. Personally, I wouldn't mind if the remake gave us more Steve sections, just so it can make him feel more important. Not gonna lie, I think it'd be cool to have Claire be swapped out with Steve for some portions of the game. Like either have him fight the first Tyrant fight, or play as him during the Arctic base. I just want Steve to be more involved with the gameplay, you know what I mean? After we learn about Steve's tragic backstory, we continue our quest to find the missing Van Gogh painting, and then we are swarmed by these things called the Albonoids, which are pretty creepy, and I hope you enjoyed that because that's the only time you'll be seeing them in the entire game. For these guys, I would just want them to be more, you know, in the game. Put these guys in more locations than just the labs. And for their design, I wouldn't change much, except for maybe changing their derpy little fins with tendrils instead. Oh, and making their face look less like an ass. After all that trouble, we now make our way to the totally not haunted house by the hill. Right off the bat, the atmosphere of this place is on point. The tall staircase, the upside down statue, and even the carousel are what makes this one of my favorite areas in the game. So for the remake, giving this area a new coat of paint and extra rooms to explore would surely be appreciated. During our adventures, we meet up with the big bad boy with the sunglasses once again. For Wesker, I don't like how he introduces himself a third of the way through the game. I would want him to be more secretive and only reveal his true powers until the end. Since this is Wesker's first big return after being killed by the tyrant in the first Resident Evil, I would want him to remain mysterious, kinda like a ghost in the past that's always haunting you at every whim. I think that'd be pretty cool for Wesker. After returning to the private residence, and finding out that Alexia is not real, we now have to escape the island before it self-destructs. Which honestly is pretty much an average Tuesday in Resident Evil land. For this one, I would want the self-destruct escape to be more intense. Maybe they could add more enemies in your path, but I would also want the environment around the player to start crumbling and falling apart to make it much more chaotic and panic-inducing. While in the middle of all of this, we come face to face with the tyrant. I'd just like to start by saying that this guy's design looks great. Just what you expect from a tyrant. But the one thing that doesn't sit right with me is that he kinda appears last second. After lifting the bridge, you get a cutscene introducing the tyrant. You don't get a minute to breathe until you come face to face with it. Then you beat it, make your escape to the plane, and then it somehow manages to get inside the cargo bay, and then you have to fight it for a couple of minutes, then you send him flying with the rest of the supplies. His entire appearance in the span of 5 minutes. So basically, I hope the remake builds up the tyrant prior to his boss fight, and for his design, make his hands and fingers stuck together in the first half, and then in the second half, his hands open up to reveal his razor-sharp claws.
That's the Antarctic. We're over the Antarctic.
What?
After baby voice Alfred hacked our plane into autopilot, we now enter the Arctic base. This is where the second half of the game takes place. I'll start this by saying simply, I want the remake to expand this area much more than any other location. The puzzles in this area are fine, but the atmosphere feels a bit bland. So if they can redesign this area to be less boring, that would be nice. But this kind of brings me to another topic. The Arctic base, while you're playing as Claire, has the theme of giant insects, such as the giant spiders, you know, the usual Resident Evil shit that you expect to see. But then you stumble upon these moth creatures, and let me just say, I like the idea of the bug infestation, but these guys are just straight up annoying as fuck. They only spawn in one room, which you wouldn't think would be bad, but it's probably the worst placement ever since it's where it connects the first floor, the second floor, and the safe room. I wouldn't mind if the moths were spread out throughout the base of the area, but I would at least make fighting them less strenuous. Also, fuck poison. Here we meet our next adversary. Nosferatu, aka Alexander Ashford, aka the son of Edward Ashford, one of the co-founders of Umbrella. You know, alongside Oswald E. Spencer. He is also the father of the Ashford twins, whom he created with DNA of his ancestor, Veronica Ashford. Get it? Code Veronica? But this would come back to bite him in the ass when his clone babies turned on him and made him into whatever this is. After we get the keys to the drilling bulldozer and manage to get outside of the base, we then come face to face with Nosferatu. For his redesign, I wouldn't change the base of the model since it looks great enough as it is. I would rather have his extra limbs crawl him around like a spider. Honestly, that would be really creepy and awesome at the same time.
I've got you now.
After defeating Nosferatu, we then make our attempt to escape. Here it's finally revealed that there is in fact an Alexia and she's been alive the entire time. Even though I thought it was pretty obvious. You even saw her in the videotapes, Claire. But anyway, Alexia was actually in cryostasis for 15 years in order to gain control of the T. Veronica virus until Alfred woke her up from her slumber. We immediately get a good idea of how powerful she is when she puts an immediate stop to our escape by bringing us back to the depths of hell. I think Alexia is an awesome Resident Evil antagonist, and I hope that the remake gives her much more to do since she barely shows up in the game until the end. Our boulder-punching Chad has finally made his acquaintance. That's right, after receiving an alert from his homie Leon, he then makes his way to Rockford Island to find Claire. Here we basically revisit some of the old locations that Claire was in, but with a few differences and altered paths. This is an idea that I really like, and I hope that the remake develops more sections like this that diverge from the old paths that Claire has already gone through. After exploring the massive rubble of Rockford Island, we are spotted by one of Wesker's drones. Here we meet a returning enemy, the Hunters, or Hunter 2s, which is pretty much no different than any other Hunter. Personally, I don't dislike these guys, but just like all sequels, they're never as good as the originals. So I don't necessarily think there's any need for them in the remake, especially since there's already a better equivalent of them in the game. The Sweepers, or Poison Hunters to be specific, are more of a spin-off series to the Hunter cinematic universe. Basically, it's a hunter that poisons you. Brilliant. They're the more menacing versions of Hunters, and I like them to stay in the remake. And as for their redesign, I would make it to where their colors are more vibrant, and they would have spikes covering its back to give off the impression that it's a toxic enemy. I think they look pretty badass. Around this point of the story, our two boys finally reunite, and my god, the tensions are high. But before Wesker can kiss a homie goodnight, Alexia pops on the TV and says,
"Haha, you foolish peasants. You're never going to find me all the way here in the Arctic." Oh shit.
And just like that, our date is cut short and Wesker walks off. Okay, for real though, I would want their reunion to feel more impactful. Especially for Chris, seeing his old nemesis still alive and more superhuman than ever. If this scene were remade, I feel like there would be much more suspense, and probably a semi-playable fight scene. After an altercation with Big W, we now make our way to the sewers, where we find our next adversary guarding the key that we need to escape. The adult albinoid is a pretty cool monster design-wise, but I don't think the same for the fight itself, since you can just grab the item and just get out of there as fast as the boss intro started. I hope that they don't make this fight optional and have the area more spread out with small spots that are above the water. And as for his design, make him look more beastly with bigger claws and add some electric spines on its back to give off the impression that it's an electrical enemy, you know?
Hold on, Claire. I'll save you.
We made it to the final stretch, everyone. I don't have a lot written down for this part, so let's just get the small topic out of the way so we can move on to the bigger parts. So while we're looking around for the missing Redfield, we see that most of the base is frozen solid. And it got me thinking if they could create a puzzle where you would have to melt ice and freeze over water in order to reach paths and areas that you couldn't before. It's kind of like in the freezer room where you would have to turn off the generator to solve puzzles, but on a massive scale. I think that'd be pretty cool. Heh, cool. After freeing Claire from her ecto-cooler prison, we are immediately separated. We get to play as Claire for a short time until we reunite with our knight and not-so-shining armor. Unfortunately for Steve, he wasn't the chosen one to continue the Redfield bloodline. For Steve's boss fight, I kinda want the remake to make this an actual boss fight. You know, in a huge arena. I think it would be much more interesting rather than running in a straight line and constantly getting slashed because his attacks are almost impossible to avoid. After dealing with Steve, we're back to playing as Chris and have ourselves a battle with Alexia. After defeating her, we then make our way back to Claire, who is sad about her dead romance, and her dead romance. Chris, knowing that Claire's true soulmate is Leon, sets out to find the self-destruct system to free her and blow this place sky high. And here we have our final bout with Alexia Ashford, and this fight is excellent in both its design and mechanics. Having its first phase be a huge nest with babies and tendrils attacking you all at the same time is pretty fun. And then it evolves into its second phase where it detaches itself from the body and flies around spewing fire at you. The one thing that really bugs me about this final boss is how Claire doesn't even fight alongside you. Like, this game started with her, but it didn't end with her, and that just bugs me. I would want both brother and sister Redfield to fight alongside each other for the final boss. I think that would be so cool. And then Chris, in the final second, just grabs the launcher and goes in for the final kill. Come on, Capcom, please give me this. After defeating Alexia and making our escape again, we are then interrupted by Wesker. And here is where we find out that Wesker actually took Steve's dead corpse for the Veronica virus within his body. And here is where we finally have our one-on-one between Chris and Wesker. But you see, this is prior Resident Evil 5 Chris, so with no boulder punching experience, he gets his ass kicked. I would kinda would like to see this scene be a fully playable brawl. Just like how they made the knife fight with RE4 Remake. Have an actual hand-to-hand duel with Wesker, that'd be sick! Also, it just doesn't make sense to me that Wesker just tells Claire that he's taken Steve's body. For me, I would have it to where Wesker never informs Chris and Claire about Steve's body. And just have a post-credit scene where Wesker is taking Steve's lifeless corpse into a submarine. One, I think this would be a good callback to him taking Krauser's dead body at the end of RE4 Separate Ways. And two, it'll be great foreshadowing for a future remake, perhaps one that's even set in Africa? After completing the story, we then unlock a bonus mode, Battle Game. This mode is pretty much a kill all enemies to advance kind of game, with plenty of characters to choose from. Each character has a different set of weapons, and once you make it to the end, you fight a different boss. This mode is really fun to play. I mean, it's not mercenaries or anything, but it's pretty cool. There is so much more you can add to this mode. Sure, you can add more characters and call it a day, but I would like to see them add a randomizer mode to the game, where not only will you have to traverse different rooms at random, but the enemies and items are also completely random. Okay, maybe that's a bit much, but you see my point. I would want the Code Veronica remake to keep this mode and implement more replayability to it. There's one more thing that this battle mode has, and I wish that they had this in the story mode. First person. Sure, the camera's not that good and it's pretty finicky, but this is something that I really like to see in the remake. And considering that Resident Evil 8 and 9 are including both third person and first person view, I think this is a likely chance that they'll add it in Code Veronica. And that's the end of my wishlist for the Code Veronica remake. Do you have any concepts that you'd like to see in the remake? Leave your comments below and I'll be sure to check them out. If you like this video, please give it a huge thumbs up, and if you want, why not subscribe as well? Also, if you'd like to see my previous wishlist videos, the playlist will be linked down below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Peace out.